All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming to, this is the third event of the Croft Center for Undergraduate Environmental Leadership, also known as CCUEL. We'll be officially launching in the fall, but we've had a series of events in the winter and spring quarter for you guys to get to know some of what we'll be offering. And our services are designed to help anyone interested in environmental topics transition from classroom to career. So we are offering a number of workshops for training in certain skills, like environmental leadership and interview skills like we did in this winter quarter, as well as these career panels. So today we're going to have 3 experts sharing their careers in corporate sustainability with you all. But before we do that, I just want to share another event that's happening tomorrow. We are going to have a Zoom information session for anyone interested in the Environmental Leadership Incubator. We have a couple current students here and an alumni as well who can share their experiences for anyone who wants to stay after and chat with them. But tomorrow we will be having an info session on Zoom. So you can go to the eli.ucsb.edu website. Under Apply Now, we'll have the link to the Zoom as well. And so our panelists today are, from left to right, we'll go Roxanne Naninga, who is with Blue Biome Advising, and then Genevieve Taft Vasquez, sorry, from the Coca-Cola Company, and then Deji Alukatun from Sonos, which is music sound experience. That was the word I was missing. I'm going to start by giving them a few minutes to introduce themselves, 3 to 4 minutes to introduce themselves, what they do in their career now, and how they got there. So I will turn it over to you. You guys will pass back the mic. You need to turn it on before we get started. And then I will be repeating any questions. I'll start today. Once they introduce themselves, I will start by asking some questions and then turn it over to you all as well. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Erica. It claims to be on. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Okay, good. Okay, well, hi, everybody. I'm Roxanne Naninga. I am founder of my own independent consulting group called Blue Biome Consulting or Advising, and I have been working as an independent consultant for about 9 months. And prior to that, I'm really kind of drawing off of a lot of different experiences working in the world of kind of corporate and business sustainability. I've worked at technology startup companies and kind of large corporate companies, always in the sort of sustainability function, either as sustainability officer or director, and then working primarily with food companies, and most of those in the kind of seafood and ocean space. So I have a kind of expertise in this nexus between corporate sustainability, oceans work, and food. And then kind of increasingly working more and more in this arena of finance and investors and trying to find more ways to bring money into the kind of sustainable economy. So hopefully we'll get a chance to dig into some parts of that, and I'm happy to answer questions about any number of those experiences. Pass it over to Genevieve.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Genevieve Taft Vasquez with the Coca-Cola Company. I am Senior Director of Sustainable Sourcing and Human Rights. So it's basically trying to figure out how we can make our products in a way that is upholding our social and environmental standards and goals. We as a company operate in 200 countries and territories. We work with an independent network of franchise bottlers, around 900 bottling plants, and then about 3,500 first-tier suppliers of ingredients and packaging suppliers. So that's really the world of the first tier that we're looking at. Increasingly, my role is focused deeper in the supply chain. Really, Coke is like an agricultural commodity cocktail. And so it is really focused on, at the farm level, how things are being grown, sustainable agriculture, water, all of those things are becoming increasingly important. And we'll talk a little bit, hopefully, about some of the regulation that is coming down the pipeline as well. So that's a lot of what I focus on. How I got here is I started out in retail. I worked for Gap Inc. Originally and in San Francisco. And it was really at this time where, things were offshoring a lot more. There was a lot of attention, obviously, in San Francisco around that. And I became very interested in supply chains and how they worked. I went back and got a joint MBA and a master's in international development. Really, again, like Roxanne was saying, this intersection of how business can have a positive impact in however they are doing business, and particularly around economic development was my particular interest. And then transitioned into the food and beverage industry. And it is a fascinating area and no shortage of things to be done, and especially with people with your expertise. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. So, no problem. How many of you before today have heard of Sonos? Okay, that's really nice. I figure everyone's heard of Coca-Cola. So I asked to put together a couple of slides just in case. We were founded here in Santa Barbara in 2002 above a burrito restaurant. And we've since grown to about 2,000 people worldwide. We're publicly traded. And we make audio speakers and what we call sound experiences. So we're a combination of software and hardware. We make physical products, but we also have software. So I just, with my couple minutes, I wanted more of an intro to what we're up to, and I'm happy to dig into my own background when we have the question section. But we launched our climate plan in 2021, and that was, it took a while to get there. It was our first year doing climate greenhouse gas accounting, and then getting approval up through the executive level and through the board. And we are en route, and we're on our path, so we're following it, and it has the steps that you can see. Just measure, which was the hardest one in the beginning, and then begin reducing. We're working on that right now, and then go carbon neutral, net zero. I know these are all terms that you're familiar with through the programs here. And if you want to go to the next one. We started our first life cycle assessment. So for physical products and consumer electronics, really understanding the full life cycle of the product is actually a huge challenge. It involves a lot of engineering, a lot of measurement, and it took us a while to get to the point where we could do that and really understand. Like Genevieve said, we have tier 1 suppliers. We are contract manufacturers who assemble our products, and then it goes all the way down to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and understanding what's in each of our products was a challenge, and it's something that you would think everyone would know, but when you have that many levels of suppliers, sometimes there are parts where you're not exactly sure what the sort of chemical composition of something is, and so on and so forth. So that is a big accomplishment that we've done over the years. I lead our I should have started with this. I lead our environmental, social, and governance and our philanthropy as well. So one thing we've tried to do is align our philanthropy with our climate action. We also support women in music and sound production, and we've supported youth music education. But for this group, we're working on something called bioacoustics. We call it our regenerative sound program. This is using sound to promote and protect biodiversity. There's a lot of really interesting academics and nonprofits working on this, including at UC Santa Barbara. So we're excited when our office moves a little closer to talk with folks in that space here. And that's been going for a couple of years. And I think just one more. This is just an example of our bioacoustics work. We support a nonprofit called Rainforest Connection, and they use AI and acoustic mapping. So they put sensors all around the world and in critical biomes and listen to the health of whether it's a rainforest or some other environment. In this picture, we did a trip with a sound recorder in Ecuador in a protected forest and recorded sounds and spatial audio so you can sort of hear it all around you. And you may not know it, but this sound recorder, who just won an award from the Explorers Club in New York, is also blind. So very interesting program that we're hoping to learn more. And that's kind of my little... Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is the last one. We joined about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, the Blue Whales, Blue Skies program. This is actually really related to here in the Santa Barbara Channel. And we felt confident joining this program because we'd already done some bioacoustics work in the Santa Barbara Channel listening for whales. supporting researchers listening for whales in the channel. And then we were approached by this NOAA group, National Oceanographic AA, Atmospheric Association, and they said, well, can you slow down your ships as they move through the Santa Barbara Channel carrying your products? And they were brilliant program, very thoughtful, and we talked to our suppliers and talked to our logistics team, and we felt we could make that commitment, so we slowed down our ships, and we asked our suppliers to slow down their ships as they pass through the Santa Barbara Channel to avoid whale strikes and to reduce our carbon emissions. So yeah, happy to dig into any of the questions.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Well, thank you all. Can you all begin by telling us also what attracted you to corporate sustainability? What appealed to you about that?
Well, I would say that for me, I've had a little bit of a winding path through my career, and that's in large part because it's sort of being invented as we go along here. So even when I did my master's at Duke, which was, I started 12 years ago, and at that time, there sort of wasn't a lot of corporate sustainability work, right? So I didn't go in and think like corporate sustainability is the place I'm going to work. I kind of came in with a knowledge that this was a growing area of work and need, and I believed I had the ability to navigate that. So I kind of got into working in economics and trade and supply chains, and I really studied the kind of movement of goods around the world and looking at the environmental concerns that creates, right? So you have issues at the level of production where fishermen are out to sea, and you're thinking about the social issues involved there, or the environmental issues with how they are fishing. But then once it lands, how is that fish processed? Where and how are those products moved? How are they contained while they are moved? Where do they end up? Who's paying what for those products, and what goes back to those producers or those processors? Who's controlling all of those flows of funds or the demands when it comes to sustainability from one end to the other, right? So that was sort of where I got into this kind of world of global trade and motivated by these questions in sustainability. And I kind of from there had the opportunity to start my own company. So I started a DNA testing company for seafood, and spent a lot of time working with food companies and understanding all of these dynamics of where they were buying fish, what their risks were, how they were or were not solving those risks, and did that for a number of years, but it was a little bit ahead of its time. Many of those companies were not quite ready to truly solve those problems. They didn't have the regulatory push at that time. So, I kind of took what I learned. I went and worked at Environmental Defense Fund, partnering with businesses, helping push them towards more responsible practices. And then from there, was recruited to join a company called Thai Union, which is the world's largest tuna processing company, and joined their sustainability team. And it was their inaugural sustainability team. There wasn't one of those before. And so it was a really exciting time because I got to help invent the entire strategy, figure out, what each piece of our strategy would mean and to whom, and how we partnered with different organizations to accomplish that. And I would say that's still kind of what's happening. We're now at a place in the kind of world of corporate sustainability that there's been an explosion in the role. There's lots of companies that now have that role or whole departments, right, that are managing different pieces of that. But the level of sophistication really varies by the type of company or the type of industry that you're in. So, I'm not 100% sure I answered the question directly, but to say it can be a winding path, and that in this work, it can be hard to predict where you're going to end up. And I think that's a bit my through line for all of my advice is that, pay attention, keep learning, and that will take you to your next step.
I think everything she just said is really important if you're interested in this area. I got interested, as I mentioned. I worked at Gap Inc., and it was now we're so used to kind of globalization and everything being made all over the place. But I came into the workforce probably in the early 2000s, but it was right around 1990 that actually there was a tipping point of more apparel was made in the U.S. than outside of the U.S. that was being sold. So it really wasn't that long ago. And so as you can imagine, in the 10 years since then when I joined, that was really where there was some growing pains and trying to understand, and there was a lot of denial by a lot of companies around like that they're accountable for their supply chain, if they're contract manufacturers, if they're own suppliers or not. And so that's how I got interested in just like how supply chains are, how they're comprised and what goes on in the supply chain. After Gap, my now husband and I moved down to Bolivia. He's from Bolivia, and worked for a fair trade organization down there. And what I guess I came away thinking was like, oh, wow, actually, there are some community, about 70% of the workforce there at that time was in the informal economy. And there was an opportunity for an organization like Gap to bring some formalization and good jobs and quality, good working conditions and things like that. And so I started thinking, oh, well, supply chains actually can have a benefit in some of these communities. And that's where I got kind of, really focused on it. That's how I wanted to get into that. And then you start seeing the nexus of, work and environment. And I think we're increasingly seeing this with the whole climate challenge. And how climate is impacting a lot of the supply chains and the people in those supply chains. So that's how I got interested. I think, as Roxanne mentioned, something to keep in mind is there is definitely an explosion in this area. Some of the jobs I find are really focused on, it seems to be like just focused on the reporting, and because they have to do that. And so it's a very like kind of manager role where you're just doing data collection. And that, might be frustrating or might be very fulfilling. I don't know, but I think what I have found is that every company is trying to build the airplane as they fly, right? Like figure this out. And so almost going into any role, you can kind of build that out and make it what you kind of want it to be. I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space as well. But that's a little bit of a watch out, I would say, if you're interested in this area, is like just being aware that there's a lot of like data collection right now and regulation going on that may not be that fun.
Yeah, that's so true. So just in terms of my own career, after law school, while I was at law school, I studied environmental law, and I was part of the Environmental Law Journal, which is not nearly as fun as it sounds. And I did a couple of internships. I did an internship at an environmental consulting firm. I did one at the OECD Environmental Directorate. But when I graduated, there were no sort of environmental positions available, or I couldn't get one. So I did a little bit of corporate law, and then said, well, I want to do something. So I went into human rights. So I did human rights for a number of years. I started in South Africa for a couple of years, and then came back to the United States after 3 years, and worked in New York for a while, mostly at the intersection between human rights and technology, free expression and technology. Worked with Google, Facebook, Twitter, all those folks trying to make decisions about what should stay online and what should not, who should moderate content and who should not. And then just in parallel, personally, I felt a need to express myself and creatively. So I have this sort of fiction. I wouldn't call it a career, but writing fiction on the side, and it became science fiction. It didn't start out that way. It was just expressing, and I think that was really important. Your job can be fulfilling, and you can do all the things you want to do professionally, but there may be still some gaps which aren't. You need to find other ways to express yourself or have fun or whatever it is, let off steam. And for me, it was fiction. So I think just in terms of, I agree with everything you said in terms of, it's interesting. We have similar touch points. We've gone and explored things in depth. And my leading sustainability for a publicly traded company was never my goal. it was an opportunity that came about because of a restructuring, which is the reality of the corporate world, is that things will change every 6 months, especially if you're on the public markets. That's how I got the opportunity. I've been supporting sustainability and in my work running philanthropy and human rights for Sonos, but that was what happened. So I'd love to say that it was all by design. It wasn't. But then when an opportunity presents itself, you grab it. And I've really enjoyed for the past 4 years or so leading in the sustainability space. And it also gave me the opportunity to combine our philanthropy with our environmental cause in a more direct way and try to align from a material sense so that the things we're giving back on have some relation to our company itself. And so I know there's more questions coming.
Yeah. So to follow up on something you each have mentioned, that sustainability is just a part of your role. So I'm wondering if you can, and I know that this is not easy to answer, but what does a day-to-day look like in your role? How much of that is sustainability, and how do you decide what those sustainability priorities are?
Oh, all right, I'll go again. Yeah, so great question. I do not believe in filling your calendar with meetings. I personally can't stand it. I burn out. I have a 5-meeting limit. I say that because a lot of people operate differently, and particularly as you sort of go higher in the sort of corporate hierarchy, your days start to look generally, because management is better compensated and has more seniority, generally your day starts filling more and more with meetings, to the extent where you're a CEO, you may just do nothing but meetings. You may not actually write anything. You might just write a couple emails or messages here or there. Your decisions are happening live. For me, it's not so much in-person meetings, but it's Zoom meetings. So that's the tool that we use. We have, before the pandemic, we were a Zoom company because we have 3 main offices around the country. So that's all a preface to say. I try not to have too many meetings, and the meetings that I have, I try to make sure are very high impact. So if I'm going to be there, I'm going to contribute or learn something that is going to influence my decision. I am a writer, so I like to express myself in writing or communicate that way. So that's just an interesting choice. But wake up. I am checking my messages as soon as I get a little bit breathing time. I think that's sort of the compromise of not always having FaceTime. So I'm checking my messages, Slack, email, scan the news to see if any big scandal has happened that relates to my work, or we have a product launch. Then I'll have a couple of meetings just to give you a sense of what I worked on today. Older products that people return, what's the right thing from a sustainability standpoint? I'm going to be talking with our team in China later tonight about how we inspect our contract manufacturers and what we call our tier 2 suppliers for human rights and labor, but also environmental. Then there's a lot of strategy work. We have a bunch of products we're working on. Where should we put our resources? I get hit up at least once a day for requests for philanthropy. Can we give money to a Parent Teachers Association, an international nonprofit, a band, a movie, you name it. It's very interesting. So a lot of that, if you can imagine, because of the size of the company, I have all these things. I think once you get to a bigger company, which is a little bit more streamlined, then you can be a little bit more specialized. So a big part of the work is taking a step back, and for me, I will actually exercise. That's one way to clear my mind, or I'll go for a walk. Santa Barbara is beautiful, so it's usually nice. And then it allows me to reflect. Okay, what should be my priority today? How does that, I've had 3 meetings. How do I realign everything I've got on my plate to focus on the most high impact thing? And we have what we call our company objectives and key results. So what are those 5? I know what the 5 are. These meetings that I'm going to have, or these conversations, how am I going to spend the rest of the day? How do they relate back to that? And the teams that I work with, how am I making sure that we're focused on those and don't get distracted by something else? So I'm trying to give you a realistic portrait of what it's actually like. I do have young kids, so I got to pick them up from school, change the diapers, put on clothes, wash the dishes, cook food, all that stuff, because we're human beings. But it's not, especially at a company of my size, of Sonos' size, it's not like there's a playbook for this. So you kind of have to do it on your own and do what works and do what's high impact.
I think similar to you, every day is different. But if I were to kind of put some buckets around the work, I would say, some work on a daily basis often touches on regulation or disclosures. So we are putting out our sustainability report in the next month. So, focusing on that, what's going to go in that, doing a lot of assurance process in terms of that. There are a lot of disclosures globally now around human rights, modern slavery, things like that, climate disclosures as well. So that'll be one bucket. Another bucket is, as you mentioned, there's usually some fire. So we're always fighting some fire, some sort of issue is coming up. And so every day we'll be, dedicating some time to an issue like that has come up. Another bucket of work will be just kind of your normal day job, like what it is that you actually are supposed to be doing on a normal, on a daily basis. And then usually trying to carve out some time on some of the more strategic decisions, like where are we going, where is our program going? And a lot of that ends up being very cross-functional. Because, I work within our supply chain, focusing on kind of sustainable sourcing. We have a lot of my peers will be focused, purely on like water strategy or recycling strategy, any of those things. So how are we kind of making sure that we're staying tied together and lockstep in terms of, future priorities and future focus. So I would say those are kind of the four big buckets on a daily basis that I might be focusing on. I will say one of the things that I enjoy most is getting out and seeing our supply chain, because that is really where I feel like I kind of really get a sense of that the work is having an impact, but then also just kind of it rejuvenates me and reminds me of like how many good people are working in this space and so many good jobs are focused here. And so I really do enjoy getting out and seeing the supply chain, probably, I don't know, once a month or, every couple months. So that is another kind of big bucket of work, I would say.
Well, I'm glad we reversed it this time, because I think it's nice to be able to benefit from what both of you have said. And I also really resonate with the need for like holding a direction. When I've been in some of those corporate roles, you get pulled in a lot of different directions. There's a million things that sustainability is. And so, you'll get different departments who will sort of ask you to join in on a lot of different aspects of the work. Some of those things are really interesting, but it's important to always kind of come back to those touch points of, what am I trying to actually accomplish here? What do I need to get to by the end of this year? How do I put that into a report? How do I make sure that that's something that has clear deliverables and progress? And that sounds sort of dry, but in a way it is really important to create focus around your work. One of the things I will say, though, that I really enjoy about being a consultant is that the work is very driven by my clients and the kind of tasks and deliverables that we've laid out ahead of time. So I get to say, okay, this is the project that we need to kind of get through in the next 6 months. And we're just working towards those things. It's a lot less ambiguous, which has been kind of a nice change of pace. But I have a nice variety of clients, which I really like. So kind of day to day. For example, I've been working with WWF on this kind of large research assessment over all of these asset managers who are, investors, looking at what types of ESG commitments they have made, and particularly to biodiversity, kind of ocean biodiversity and seafood, and trying to help move them towards setting more clear commitments in this arena, so that all of the companies they invest in that would be in the oceans and seafood space have very clear expectations from those who are providing them funds. So writing a report on that. That's just one specific example. I'm also helping to organize a conference, and the work I'm doing there is bringing together different people who are having conversations in this case about human rights in the shrimp industry. And there was a very large story that came out. Genevieve and I were relating about this, and these big human rights stories, when they break, are important to pay attention to, and they create a real scramble across the industry. And so trying, in my case, to put together a conference session on this topic has become really hard, because nobody really wants to be in front of it right now. There's a lot of sort of anxiety over what each company wants to say their position is. And so even though I'm in the interest of driving productive dialogue around due diligence and helping create more collaborative solutions to make this problem better, it can be hard. And I think whatever your role is in these scenarios as a sustainability professional, to think about the motivations that people have in whatever role or part of the world they're in, and focus them towards the kind of outcome you're trying to create. So if it's greenhouse gas reduction, think about one pragmatic thing you can talk about or focus on. Or if it's human rights, trying to figure out what particular aspect is most critical to address in that scenario, and try to focus conversations on that. So anyway, that's a bit of a divergence, but to say that there's the consulting work is fun in the sense that I can do a lot of different things, but you're still always responsible for what you've created at the end of the day.
Great, thank you. I have one more question that will hopefully help some students think about how to get their foot in the door in a corporate sustainability field or world. But then I do want to turn it over to questions for you guys. So think about your questions. But for one more question from me, how would you suggest, what are some recommendations for students that they can do to get that entry-level position, or something they could be doing now to develop skills that would be helpful for them in these careers?
I'll go first. All right. Well, I would say if you are interested in this space, you are entering in a great time, because there is a huge explosion. There's also a large backlash, I will say, on this topic. So for good and for bad. There are a lot of positions open. And again, my only kind of maybe advice is just weeding out those that where you think it's going to be an actual impact versus just data collection. And maybe you're okay with that, but maybe that's totally fine with you. But I am noticing a lot of primarily data management, and I wonder if those companies are going to use that to take strategic decisions, or if it's just complying. But we'll see. So a lot of opportunities, I would say, even just if you looked on LinkedIn. Also, targeting, and I'm sure you're doing a lot of networking and things, but targeting companies that you're interested in, and just, make sure that you're trying to network with somebody there. I think that goes a long way to if you can be referred to the hiring manager, that will get you so much more visibility in applying to a job than just applying cold. It goes for across the board. And then the third thing I would say is just in any role that you go in, if this is of interest, is to just make it part of your role. Be the internal champion wherever you are, because there is so much to be done. And I think any company, if you're interested, company that's interested in this topic needs as many internal champions as possible, and is looking for people to get involved. And so that's kind of a great way to just say, hey, I want to, in our particular case, and this is probably a topic of another conversation around workforce development, but we have short-term assignments and we have short-term experiences. Short-term assignments are like you go for 6 to 9 months and you fill in full-time for a job. Short-term experiences are you're just giving maybe 5, 10, 15 hours of your week dedicated to a topic. And so I have a couple STAs and STEs who will then just kind of fill in and help out. And that gets them to be, more bringing their expertise in, but then also engaging on the topic, and gives them something on their resume as well. So a couple of ideas.
Those are good ideas. This is maybe something you already do, but one of the things that I've often done is I sort of do it's sort of an informal research approach where I look across job boards, a million job boards, and look at different job postings and start paying attention to the common threads between some of these job postings. What are they looking for? And then kind of on the second layer, think about what matches your natural skills or interest. And then if there's a gap there, take some coursework in that area or build your network, go to a conference that is related to that topic. Try to find ways of filling in your sort of resume on that topic so that you can start getting yourself in position for the types of jobs you're looking for. And then, like Genevieve was saying, really find your network, invest in that network, stay in touch with those people, go to conferences with those people. That goes a pretty long way in terms of finding what's out there. And sometimes, I think also what Genevieve was saying, you're not going to find the perfect job right away, or you may not know your path. Like I sort of was like that. Just go, wow, okay, this is a cool thing. And you don't always know where that cool thing is going to take you next. But when you get to whatever that is, think about what skills you can build there, what you can contribute to that place, and then start thinking about if it's not there that you can grow, what can you really learn and leverage at that place that you can take to the next job that you want to go to next. And again, maybe it's not the job you stay at for the next 20 years, maybe it is, but I think always having a mind towards what you want to build for yourself and then write that onto a resume. Don't leave your resume sitting there for a whole year. Like regularly go back and visit it. Put some new words in when you've sat on a hiring committee or whatever it is, and just keep it active. LinkedIn as well, right? And then just use those tools to your advantage, because then you're ready when you meet somebody who's like, oh, I'm looking for such and such. And you can say, oh, great, my LinkedIn's up to date and here's my resume and I'm ready to do it.
That's all great advice. I think I'll start by saying I recognize how hard it is to get a job straight out of college or graduate school. It's hard. And I think you see those lucky people who can they got it figured out. They're going to get it. But my memory was it was hard, and it seems like it's still hard today. So recognizing that and appreciating what you're about to go through when you're ready for that. I think resourcefulness has served me really well. And by that, I mean change is going to come. It's coming. You read the headlines. There's some things that stay the same, but there's a lot that's moving very fast, and some of it's great. They're great opportunities. Like in the climate space, I saw a study a couple weeks ago that there's something like $40 billion of venture capital money waiting to invest in climate startups, and that's an opportunity. But there is also very other sectors. Genevieve mentioned the work at Coca-Cola. I think that's an interesting one to think about, is that some of the more established Fortune 500 companies have really good programs for sourcing talent, advancing talent, and offering some companies call them like stretch goals or stretch assignments. What did you call it? Short-term assignments. And there's formal programs around that. And if what you want is real training and opportunity for advancement, sometimes that's the best path. It may not be the most, it's not like working for OpenAI, which is, doing all this crazy stuff and changing the world with AI. But some of the best positions and some of the best training will be at a Fortune 500 company or an established company with a record of nurturing talent. So I think that's something that's worth thinking about. One thing that is good if you can get an internship is you can see you may not actually want to do this for your day job, but you may want to have it be a part of the company or the place where you work, that it's important to them, because some of the work, as Genevieve was saying, can be a little bit dry. It can be data analysis, it can be cross-functional work that maybe isn't all that fun for people, so I think recognizing where you might want to sit within that. My standard, which I've never said aloud, was when it came to stories on the fiction side, I was like, I don't want to work for a place that destroys stories and makes the world worse. You know, like that was kind of one thing. Like I want to go to a place that is tapped into some vein of humanity and feel like I'm participating in something in some way. That was like on the fiction side. On the sort of sustainability and human rights side, I said I don't want to work for a place that I know is making the world worse. That was kind of like my line, which leaves a lot of room for picking stuff. There's a lot of room to go there. And then I'll just say you can make a big impact by just sitting within a company or an NGO or government, and someday a decision may come to you. It may be for our company, you know what? I know it's harder, but I'm going to choose recycled plastic. And that's not your job. Your job is to find the best material at Sonos for something to sound good, for the speaker to sound good. But you're saying, you know what? I know it's going to cost a little bit more, but I think if we work a little bit harder, we're going to put in recycled plastic. And it's a lot of times those are the heroes, the people who do something that they don't have to do, but they do it anyway. And then it has this huge ripple effect, which has happened at Sonos for our most recent speakers. People made the decision to go after recycled plastic. And just to provide a little insight, it sounds good, recycled plastic, but when it comes to audio speakers, when the sound is being pushed out, and the air is being pushed out by the transducers, it heats up, and you may have a speaker that needs to be outside, and it's getting sunlight, or it's exposed to, you take it to the beach, it's exposed to suntan lotion. All these things, recycled plastic, the resins right now aren't that good. So like, it sounds easy to just say, why don't you have more recycled plastic? Well, actually, we need to invent a new resin to do that. And so my point in all this is that you may sit in an area of a company or and make a decision like that has a huge impact across the organization, and it takes courage in its own way.
And as many as we can. I'm going to repeat the questions, and I failed to mention at the beginning the microphones are not actually to amplify this room, but are tied to the video recording so that people who couldn't come today will be able to listen to this on our website in the future. Does anyone have a question? Lisa?
So I was curious, I don't know if you guys are in that position of hiring other people, I'm assuming for roles that are looking for, but have you noticed any skills that are lacking when it comes to new hires? And then also, what skills do you think you utilize the most in your career growth?
All right, so for new hires, what skills are lacking in new hires, and what skills you've used the most?
I think I'll start out by saying I'm always very impressed by the younger people coming into any company I've worked in. I don't feel like there is a singular skill gap out there. And actually, I feel like a lot of the young generation coming into the workforce are really well prepared for learning and kind of trying a lot of different things in order to find your place in the workforce. So I don't have a clear answer on that. I think that for me, some of the most useful skills have been, I think I developed this a little bit more into graduate school, but my trust in my ability to really learn something and to learn something deeply. So I think it's very easy to doubt, okay, here's a thing over here, a sustainability role, for example, in tech. And I've worked in food tech, but maybe it's true software technology. And I don't really know anything about that, it seems, on the surface. But if I dig in a layer deeper, I'm like, well, what is it that they're really looking for? Oh, it turns out a lot of that's pretty similar to work I've done. And I just need to understand more about the context. And I know I can take the time to find the resources and really learn about that context to get me from where I am to where I would need to be for that role. And I think that's something that, just really learning how to learn, understanding where to find good information, reliable scientific information, then I think that can take you a long way, especially in these types of roles where you are called upon to be a person of integrity and of science, right? You want to be talking on behalf of truth and facts.
Yeah, I would say maybe again not necessarily a particular skill, but having a specific knowledge is actually really helpful. So technology, obviously, right now is really helpful because, we're doing a lot of kind of forecasting, data analysis, and understanding how we can kind of improve what we're doing through technology. So I do think having, a strong skill set is important. Just having I care about this, that actually is not super helpful in terms of being hired, at least in my perspective. But that said, being able to kind of step back and put it into context, I think, is also really important. So having that strategic mindset, and a little bit of what Roxanne was saying about ability, I would call it almost like adaptability. So things change a lot, and just being able to kind of not say, well, this is how we've done it, and so this is how it should be done, but willing to kind of learn something new and adapt to it and say, okay, let's figure out here's an issue, another obstacle today, let's figure out how to make that work. So I think those are kind of a couple things that I would mention. And there was one more I wanted to mention and I forgot. I'll let you do it then.
What was the question?
Skill set. Oh, yeah.
Was it?
Skills that you feel
Skills
like
that
you
you-
missed and that you think students would need to have.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just listening to you. And I was, oh, shoot, what's the
Oh,
question?
wait, sorry.
Yeah, all right.
I will take it back. I know I've been saying like this whole compliance and the data management, all of that is frustrating. But actually, I would also say one thing that I appreciate is when people come in and they're willing to kind of like do some grunt work and get their hands dirty, and then, take that and say, okay, how do we improve the process, or how do we take this and do something different, or build that strategic mindset. I don't like interns or newly hired when they come in and there's a little bit of a sense of entitlement of like, well, I don't want to get my hands dirty doing stuff. So I would just maybe add that to the list as well.
Yeah, I think agree with everything you said. I don't like the idea of paying your dues, because I've always felt in my career that was unfair. It was like a way of putting up a gate. So by that I mean, oh, you got to pay your dues and just stuff envelopes for weeks on end. I think, though, I agree with that the employees, especially when you're getting started, who say yes to things and say, I will do it and I will take care of it and I will handle it and I'll get it back to you at the time. That's just basic any work, but that will benefit you. And it probably will feel sometimes humiliating. Hopefully you don't have a boss who would do that to you, because then you probably shouldn't be at that job or working for that person. But there is something to be said for that. So ESG, when I use that term, we have to put out our annual report. There's data gathering, greenhouse gas accounting. It will be increasingly automated within the next 5 to 10 years. But right now it's messy for a lot of companies like us. Some of that work is not glamorous. But if you go and you take it and you do it efficiently, a good boss or supervisor will then give you higher quality work, or say, oh, you're already done. You did it right. Now I'm going to up level you. And that they should be looking out for you in your career development, but that work still needs to get done. So it's just an attitude thing, which is hard. I'm quite proud myself. I don't like drudgery, but I just try to put it in my calendar, and this is the time where I'm going to do the drudgery work, the boring stuff, and then I've got a couple hours to do the more interesting stuff. Yeah, I think one really, just practically speaking, because we're a small company, we don't hire much within the sustainability realm. I can tell you the decision between the top candidates to join my team ultimately came down to, they were two excellent candidates. One of them had some actual climate experience and could speak with a little bit of confidence about the greenhouse gas protocol in a way that I knew that I could trust her with the sort of sheer volume of work that was coming with our climate action plan. And that was the difference. I should say the other big area where we have sustainability, actually full-time sustainability people, is within our product team. And they, when they interview, are looking for people who are familiar with product development. And that's not software, that's hardware. It's very specialized. So a lot of the folks from that team come from color, material, and finish. They're came from companies where they learned how to put on the color, material, and finish for some sort of product. And that meant they understood from incubation, from the moment a product was the idea, someone came up with an idea, to all the different steps. They had some sense of what that would look like at Sonos or some other company. It's very specialized, and in fact, not a single person on that team actually had a sustainability background. I think in the future that will change, but to get hired on that team, I can tell you need an actual product development experience, and you don't need to get that at a sustainability organization. You could get that working for any hardware company.
And then I just want to put a plug in for starting a startup. If this is something that you have an interest in, there is just now so much more out in the world in terms of resources, investment, incubators. That is a really excellent way in many ways to get into a career, because you can, if you're starting it yourself, or you join a team, you can get involved with all kinds of work, right? It's not that bureaucratic at a startup. You can build a lot of things and succeed and fail at a lot of different things. And so I think for me, that was one of the best things I did. It's risky, but it's if you have that ability to do it, I think it's great.
Great. We have 5 more minutes. I think we could do one more quick question. Does anyone have a burning question for our panelists? I see 2 hands. I'm going to go right here in the front, and then hopefully we'll have time for your questions.
Hi, my name is Ada, and one of the questions that was sort of on my mind was that, what advice do you guys have for students who are entering their first sort of corporate role within an internship? What type of etiquette? What can you do to immerse yourself more so into the culture? Sort of I guess more so thinking about adjustment.
Do you want to collect the other one, and we can just maybe divide?
I was just going to ask, how important do you think it is to get your master's or pursue some sort of secondary education to go into this field?
Anyone that you guys want?
I'll speak to the degree one.
Okay. Just in terms of advice, you're saying starting an internship or first job, is that? I really, when you're starting out, it's actually such a great time. You have the excuse of saying, hey, I'm new here, or I'm an intern, or I just started. Can I talk to you about your job? And it's, if you're 5 years in, it's a little harder to do that, but it's such a great opportunity. And people love to talk about what they do. Look, we have 3 people here. We all love our jobs, so it's a great time to, whether it's a summer internship or you're starting out, the job is just reach out. You can do cold calls, cold emails, and just talk to people about their roles and what they're doing. And it's also a great way to kind of find mentors within organizations. And then as opportunities arise, they, might have you in mind as well. And then I think what he mentioned about this saying yes, and again, not to do just everything and not having boundaries, but just being, willing to kind of do things and being open to kind of some of the new experiences. I think those are great ways to show your interest and expand your role and opportunities. Agree?
Yeah. Just on the degree question, this is we've experienced this. I've experienced this personally. So I believe in education. I have 2 master's degrees. I have a law degree. I enjoyed school, although I was kind of like this gentleman here who walked in late. That was usually me. I'd walk in 20 minutes late and sort of try to figure out what was going on. I was not good at attendance. That was not my specialty, but I liked school and learning. So if it interests you and you go for it, and I think there will be certain types of roles where you do need that education. And I think as sustainability becomes more and more professionalized, those will be markers. But I can say it can also work against you, which sounds weird. For certain junior level, entry level positions, you don't want to hire someone with a master's degree. They're probably overqualified, and they will be dissatisfied with the type and quality and initiative available to them. So it's if you go for and I think a lot of this is an unspoken thing that happens in employment, that there is this feeling of overqualified. I used to hate that when people would say that to me, but you can understand with the background I just told you about myself, that if I was applying to an entry-level position with the degrees that I had, they'd be like, he's going to be so bored, or he's going to make trouble because it's this salary, this is the level of responsibility, and he's set up to do these things based on his education. So I think it is a real thing, but if education's important, go for it. It just may mean that those sort of entry-level roles won't be there for you.
Yeah, and I agree. And I would add maybe just a bit of like working for a little while, particularly if you can get a job within a field that you're interested in, and then going on to do your graduate studies, I think is very effective. I did not really have the opportunity to get into this field until I did my master's. I had like a first career in science teaching, which was a very rich and wonderful experience in my life. But I needed that master's to really have the credibility and a skill set that would get me into this career.
Thank you. So in defense of the latecomers, I do realize that class got out at 12:15, and so we will adjust these career panels in the future so that more of you can attend and not overlap with your classes. As our panelists said, lean into your opportunities in terms of talking to people. I'll put another plug up for the Environmental Leadership Incubator and our Zoom meeting tomorrow, information session for anyone who's interested in attending. Eli, I don't have the website up, but you can barcode it, or it's eli.ucsb.edu. We also have a webpage dedicated to job and internship listings. We have our student here who posts all those opportunities for you, so lean into that and see what's out there. And like our panelists said, look at the skill sets that the different positions are hiring for, and that will help as well. But please join me in thanking our panelists today. Thank you all for coming. And thank you all for coming as well. I don't know if you all have to run, but please, everyone, help yourselves to some food. And as I said, we've got some Eli students in the room. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves about the program and different opportunities as well. Thank you.